Well, hello and welcome, everybody. Today I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. Rachad Najjar, and we're going to talk about the combination of generative AI and knowledge management and that integration point. My name is Daniel Ranta. I'm an adjunct professor at Kent State University, as long as somebody who's been in this space related to knowledge management as either an executive or a consultant or leading consulting practices for nearly 3 decades now. So, Rachad, just want to welcome you here to the conversation today. And this is going to be a good one because we want to demystify what's happening out there in terms of this space and that integration with knowledge management. So welcome.
Thank you, Dan. It's a great opportunity to have to be here in this session. And as you mentioned, we want to really clarify and differentiate and also further develop on how AI can better be integrated within KM field. I've been leading global companies in the field of organizational learning and knowledge management, and always the question was from internally, from employees, oh, we have new technology, can we use it from knowledge sharing or learning? And always my reaction was, let us first understand what we have and how it can add value. And this is exactly where today we are going to focus on where AI and Gen AI can add value to learning and knowledge sharing.
And to complement what you're saying there is I love how you bring learning into the equation as well. To help organizations. So many talk about how we want to become a learning organization. So the knowledge management processes and learning, you and I think we're of a similar mindset where we know that those kind of things come together. So bringing generative AI in is very, very interesting. So today, what we're going to be featuring, this is part one. And so in part one, we're going to be talking about an overview of generative AI, what it is, some of the misconceptions and vision, and then some of the challenges associated with the learning and the knowledge management or KM side of the equation, as we talk overall about where and how generative AI is accelerating and impacting learning and knowledge management and those processes that need to come into play in really small, medium, and large global organizations as well. So we're going to kick it off with a discussion here in part one about misconceptions and vision. So Rachad, I know this slide builds, and let me just build this out for you.
Yeah, great, thank you. Great, thanks, Dan. So what I'd like to start with is really to clarify and differentiate Gen AI in the context of the global AI evolution. So because I got some feedback and some people think that Gen AI is a new technology or new development. In fact, it goes back really to the mid-1950s. And the first intelligent behavior was exhibited by Alan Turing. Alan Turing designed and defined the Turing test, a measure of machine ability to behave intelligently. And then it has really evolved, and the first major milestone was in 1956 with John McCarthy, who organizes the Dartmouth conference, making the official birth of AI. AI then evolved into symbolic AI and then robotics and neural network. And what's interesting really at 2014, and this is where the early beginning of Gen AI with Ian Goodfellow and his colleague who introduced the Gen AI, more specifically generative adversarial network, which is a class of machine learning. I will introduce machine learning in the next slide and really position Gen AI with respect to machine learning. So the next slide positions Gen AI within the field of artificial intelligence. So first of all, Gen AI is a subfield of deep learning, and deep learning is a subfield of machine learning. And what's interesting about machine learning, they are a program or a system that trains a model from input data. So there's a trained model can make useful predictions from a new or never before seen data drawn from the same one used to train the model. In simpler words, it means when we ask a question to a trained model, it's going to predict an answer. It's not really answering the question, it is predicting. And this is the whole concept about AI. There's either prediction or classification. Those are the two use cases for AI. So Gen AI can produce a new type of content, and I want to differentiate content and knowledge. Those are not synonyms. So Gen AI cannot produce or generate new knowledge. It can create new content from text, audio, synthetic data, and produce the same set. Today, we are talking about multimodal AI, like ChatGPT version 4 and Google Gemini. They are multimodal, which means they can take as input different types of content, image, video, audio, text, and can produce various types of content.
So you know what
yes.
I want to say is that I love how you've positioned this with these two slides and building on this, because it's been 75 years. So there's quite a base and quite a historical kind of block of knowledge that has been building to get to this point. I think a lot of people see generative AI and they're thinking that, you know, wow, this is just something that happened in the last, you know, couple of years or something like that. There's been a lot of work from a lot of very, very smart thought leaders in the world, globally speaking, and to be able to get to this point where we are. Go ahead.
Yep, exactly. And we will talk furthermore on why Gen AI got the attention, because AI is an old discipline, but why Gen AI got the attention. We will develop more on this idea. Then the next slide, what's interesting, or we want to really showcase the transformation mechanism. So initially, Gen AI, not the multimodal one, let's say the 3.5 version, it takes the text as input and then transform it to a new type of content, either a text, a code, image, speech, video, 3D objects, or any other kind of type. So as you can see, the possibilities really here are very diverse. From a single text, we can produce a new content type. And you can see the applications like in speech, we can produce voice synthesis or lip syncing. And today we are seeing some kind of deep fake, which is another misleading use case. We can really fake someone with his own voice and make him say some words or some ideas he never said it. So with lip syncing, with voice synthesis and speech translation, all those are possible. And we will also discover more some kind of ethics and responsible AI in further slides, the ethics of using a responsible AI.
Right. That starts to get us into the thoughts around the governance or shared accountability and how you want to create those norms or the protocol within an organization for how AI could operate within your organization.
Yeah. And to give some ideas and some examples on the next slide about what are the most, let's say, used tools or getting some attention in respect to every content type. OpenAI ChatGPT is the most famous example, but also in software engineering, like producing a code, GitHub Copilot and the PyCharm are using Gen AI to leverage their enormous code database and to help the software engineers to produce some standard modules or some standard libraries or some standard pieces of a code just by describing what the developer wants. And there was a study, they showed there was increase in productivity in terms of software programming between 15 to 25%. Software engineers are more productive in terms of code generation and accelerating the development of their applications.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember when you and I both worked at GE, the idea of patterns or creating these modules like you're talking about can definitely accelerate and really make more accurate, but definitely save time and make more effective the software specialists within the organization.
Yep. When we talk about Gen AI, it's really about transforming a text into another type, content type. And this is known as prompt engineering or prompt design. And to write a prompt or to write a question, there are some best practices to write a code or a prompt. In other words, a question, to ask a question. So what we can really share and advise on prompt engineering is to express the query or the question as clearly as possible. For example, if I want to generate an outline for a report, it's better advice to be specific, which means write an outline for an academic research proposal that includes sections for title, summary, and next steps. So the more we are precise and detailed, the better and more relevant the outcome will be. So that was step one. Step two is to experiment. We should not really stop with one time question or query. We should really fine tune it. And we can choose the tone or the style. So we can add to our prompt, write it in a professional tone, write it in informal tone, in funny tone. So we can specify the style of our output content. And the third and the final step or recommendation is to follow up with questions. Gen AI have memory, and they are best, let's say, leveraged when they are followed up on questions. So after asking to generate that outline for a research proposal, we can follow up to say, like, write a professional summary for a marketing analyst looking for a marketing manager job. And we can follow up with now trim it down to less than 60 words. And we can follow up with rewrite it with a less formal tone. So the more we follow up on questions, the more we are more specific and we add context and details to our query, the more relevant the output will be.
That reminds me, I live in Latin America. That's where I'm based. And I always, when I'm using AI, I always want to make sure that if I do anything in Spanish, that I use Latin American Spanish. So another example of how I want it to be characterized, the type of syntax, diction, et cetera, that I want to use. So really, really important.
Yeah, great example.
Misconceptions.
Yes. So there are some misconceptions related to Gen AI. First of all, let me ask you this question. If there's a technology X, and this technology heavily relies on human intelligence to function correctly, can we describe or say this technology is intelligent?
Yeah. This drives me toward one of my passions, and it's kind of in the area of knowledge management. It's how we turn tacit knowledge into explicit, because so much of the knowledge within organizations is inside of people's heads. So that's what I mean by tacit knowledge. So if you're able to tap into curated tacit knowledge and you're able to create those processes within organizations, then all of a sudden you're really enriching kind of that bullpen or repository of really valuable, trusted, validated content from true experts or people with expertise, that it's going to increase the quality of your AI related results. And I think that's the type of thing you're driving at with your question, Rachad.
Exactly. So human in the loop, we always need human validation for AI. And in addition to that, to train GPT-3 or Google Bard or any kind of LLM, we needed something called ghost workers. So ghost workers are paid, imagine, around $2 to $9 per hour to do some kind of menial tasks. such as identifying objects in an image. This is a fish, this is a dog, this is a lake, this is a car, or provide more accurate labeling. So this is a green apple, this is a red apple. So to offer more precision. And that was needed during the training phase of AI. Or any kind of large language model. So this kind of phenomena, it's called digitalization paradox. We want some kind of artificial intelligence, but we still rely on a human. So this is kind of paradox.
Understood.
Yeah, and the next, so, and to follow up on a point why earlier on we said why Gen AI got the attention more over the traditional AI. Because really here we are, Gen AI was possible with the help of extreme computing. Today we are talking about high performance computing. And to give you an idea, GPT-3, which has 175 billion parameters, compared to GPT-4, which has 1.7 trillion, so almost 10 times more. So to take the GPT-3, which is just the version 3, which is 10 times less efficient than GPT-4, it consumed around 25 to 50 questions, one bottle of water for every 25 questions. And it emissioned, although this infrastructure of high computing clusters, they consumed or produced CO2, they emission CO2, which is equivalent to 60 flights between London and New York. And they consumed energy equivalent to 90 households for 1 year. So for 1 year, they consumed the energy required for 90 households. So putting all those factors in and factoring in water consumption, CO2 emission, energy consumption, with this massive infrastructure, can we also ask or say again, this technology is intelligent when it is consuming and depreciating our limited resources, in addition to our human in the loop or those ghost workers? This is the question that I'm asking.
Yeah, very, very interesting perspective to look at it from that angle. A lot of times people, as I clicked one more time here, you can see what you're referencing in terms of water consumption, the emissions, and the energy consumption. And that will only continue to increase, is what my imagination is telling me.
Yep. The second misconception, also I hear a lot of feedback during conferences or just some discussions, that Gen AI is part of digital transformation. It is an IT project. We are going to deploy a new technology, a new system. It's going to be operational, and we have done this transformation. It is exactly the opposite. In fact, it is part of the cultural transformation. It is, and also some feedback I hear that AI or Gen AI is going to replace our jobs, and it's going to steal or eliminate our jobs. In fact, people who embrace AI are those who are going to replace people who doesn't, because essentially Gen AI is not a technology. It is a capability. It is a skill booster. It is really an expansion of our human abilities. So when we augment our human abilities in terms of reasoning or analyzing or summarizing with AI, now we have an edge over our peers or our, let's say, colleagues. So organizations need to understand that Gen AI is a competency. It's not a technology. And we need to rethink how to couple this technology or this Gen AI, those competencies and abilities, with our job descriptions and our, let's say, abilities.
You know, that's a fascinating subject, and one that plays into areas where I have a lot of experience and a lot of passion. People ask me about digital transformation. I always start with, this is about people, culture, leadership, and the behavior aspects of it. And so many companies I see that talk about cultural transformation or digital transformation will lead with that technology and think that's all, that's all we really need, et cetera. And I think that when we get later on, when we get and we talk about the learning and KM challenges, and then in part two, we talk about learning and knowledge management use cases, we're really going to be able to hit on that from a tangible standpoint and see some concrete examples of how the point you're making here is a major misconception. Let me go ahead and go to the next slide. Misconception number three.
Number three, and the final one, responsible AI. We tackled a little bit about the deep fake. Responsible AI is a checklist. So now what I saw and some feedback also, companies are trying to shortlist and create a checklist for responsible AI. They said, okay, responsible AI should be transparent, should be unbiased, it should be trustworthy. And when we check those boxes, we have a responsible AI. That's not the idea, because responsible AI should be really evaluated as a case, separately, independently. Every application, Gen AI application, should be re-evaluated based on the company core values. So for example, if we are developing a face recognition technology, so should the company make available the face recognition API to the public? Which population should be selected? How to avoid biases during the training phase? Should the data set be limited to celebrities and public figures? Should the API be limited to only governmental agencies and the human rights? What about privacy? And what about our personal right to save our data? So for every application, there's a new set of questions to ask to evaluate whether this application is responsible, ethical, or not. That's why we cannot reduce it to a single checklist. Of course, we have our company core values. That's what we are evaluating against those applications, but it should be treated separately, every application.
That's fascinating, because those monumental open-ended questions and it should help our listeners understand that, it's not just a list of bullet points. It's not just a checklist from 1 to 20 or whatever it might be. So only time will tell in terms of how those get fleshed out.
Yep, I totally agree. And that will lead us to our vision. Then we talked a lot about how we can integrate AI, where Gen AI is heading toward to, how it's going to transform our jobs. And we both agreed that the future of AI is in personalization. It is interactive, and it requires a paradigm shift in the culture, in the operating model. And I still remember when you really make very clear the point that experts and domain specialists, they need to play an active role in defining those use cases, which we are going to elaborate more in part two. So we really need to think about use cases. We need to think about the culture, the operating model, how we are going to shift our processes, our behaviors, how we are going to include a human workforce, how we are going to augment their abilities, and how to make it personalized. So the marketing function, the supply chain, IT functions, engineering functions, how to better craft a Gen AI use case for their needs. And this is where experts will play a role. And the importance of communities, and what you can tell us about the importance of communities to play within the definition of those use cases.
Well, what I would say is I go back to the maturity model you built for a learning organization. I think about, there's 5 phases of that. And I sometimes call them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But Monday, of course, is where you're tapping into those true experts. And we call that the hero phase. And so if you're only counting on those key brokers who are heroes, you're going to run into a scenario where they're going to be overburdened. They're not going to be able to fulfill all the needs. Maybe there's demographic challenges associated with baby boomers leaving the workforce, et cetera. So being able to use the community idea and have a smarter networking approach to really human engineer and blend not just the people with expert who are certified experts, but people with expertise and get them involved, more diversity of thought, more inclusivity into this personalization model of AI and what can drive it to be a higher level of effectiveness to be achieved. So all those things come into play, and it really becomes a human-based ecosystem, if you will.
Totally human-based, inclusive, and diverse. To give more examples about this vision, then let us showcase some 3 examples that we developed together. And let's start with personalized medicine. So let's take an example in the field of pharmaceutical and biotechnology, which is a process of discovering and developing new drugs. It is incredibly complex, time-consuming, and very expensive. Gen AI can help to make this process more individualized because there's a capacity. Gen AI can analyze individual patients' genetic and medical data to suggest personalized drug treatments. So by considering patients' unique genetic makeup and disease characteristics, it can recommend the most effective and least harmful drug. AI or Gen AI is very good at doing pattern matching and creating relationships. So predicting drug-to-drug interactions, we can minimize the risk of having conflictual drugs. So if I am on 2 treatments, Gen AI can analyze those relationships, and then it can suggest or recommend whether we can continue taking those 2 drugs together or just take one of them.
And this is a great example. And I'm thinking about how this can be compressed. And it seems like on a daily basis, we're hearing examples of how AI is driving better diagnostics when it comes to drugs. And let's not forget about the regulatory angle as well, because if we can compress that time for new pharmaceuticals, new drugs to come to market and involve the regulatory as well, you can start to imagine how beneficial this can be for society. Example number 2.
Number 2 is related to another function, sales and marketing. Today we are talking about hyper-personalized content for dynamic audience targeting and segmentation. So Gen AI can combine, again, Gen AI is very good at doing pattern matching and relationships. So it can combine and analyze large amounts of data, such as demographic information, existing customer data, market trends, and identify additional audience segment. Which leads to identifying unique traits and drafting unique messages and content addressing or targeting those sub segments, which lead to hyper personalization and more tailored experience to audiences.
You know, I talk to friends and colleagues about this, and sometimes people will complain about, it seems like somebody knows what I know, what I want to know before, and it arranges to send me something when I'm in a social network or out on the web. Personally, I find this very convenient because I want things that are relevant. And I think most people will kind of move into that kind of philosophy where if you have more relevant things that are coming to me, what I'm more interested in or what I need, et cetera. And that's what this is about. So it's a powerful example. Example number 3.
Yeah, related to, this is my personal experience, fitness and workout. I always try to create a fitness workout, but slowly I abandon this plan because it's not tailored to my personal and physical characteristics. So I want something more personalized and more really specific to my body weight, to my cardio routines, to my muscle gain, endurance, and taking into account my characteristics, my physical characteristics, body constraints. Gen AI can provide and suggest some kind of tailored and personalized fitness and workout. We can augment it with some dietary recommendation, meal plans, some calories, and some if I have some allergies, we can put it in the mix, and I can get recommendation on what to do, what type of exercises, and what meals I should take.
Yeah. You know, I like to say that I work out, but only once a day. I just say that to get people's attention. But the point here that I see is that I think we can all learn from this, because I get into a bit of a rut where I'm doing
Yeah.
the same thing all the time, and the same exercises. And I often wonder, you know, should I be doing something else? And so this can open our eyes to that kind of thing. And another really powerful and good example. Let's
Definitely.
transition into learning knowledge management challenges. And I know you have one here, number 9, that you want to feature and talk about. We're not going to talk specifically now about all of these, but they are on the screen, and perhaps our listeners can think of even more of the learning and knowledge management related challenges to address when it comes to generative AI development.
Definitely. And I still recall then one of our brainstorming sessions when we were thinking together, what are those challenges? And we had that question coming over and over. What are the organizational learning and knowledge management processes specifically that has been mostly augmented and impacted by AI capabilities? And these persistent questions, we are going to develop it more in this presentation and elaborate on those processes and AI capabilities.
Yeah, and what I have to mention here is how you and I are both huge fans of taxonomy, but taking the taxonomy and turning it into a set of capabilities and competencies and skills. And we often refer to that as our circulatory system. So when you think about processes for learning and how knowledge flows, it should flow along and be augmented by that circulatory system of people's skills, so that, again, we talked about the relevancy and not and avoiding information overload. So things, knowledge, and content are delivered just in time on a more personalized basis, et cetera. So I think that AI has a huge example. I know we'll talk about that in part 2 when we talk about the use cases, but has a huge role in that level of personalization and getting engagement based on that in an organization. Now, we're going to transition to, I think I'm going to refer to this, Rachad, the study that you did. It's really a game changer. I mean, and I mean that in the greatest way. When you first told me you were going to look at 100 different AI tools and technologies, companies that are in this space, I thought, you know, are there 100 out there? But you found them and you went through this. So talk about this really groundbreaking study that you did. And it really, I thought your work was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I still recall the first moments when I got this internally is that something within inside me, my curiosity, when I saw the rush to implement ChatGPT, and everyone was talking about ChatGPT and how we can implement it. I said it has to be something more. As expert, a thought leader, we need to have active role in defining those use cases. And also, I was intrigued by what are the possibilities beyond text generation or text summarization, which are the 2 most standard use cases by ChatGPT. So I started really this quest to find out more the possibilities and or the limitation, because there is limitation. We are still really far from relying completely on the technology. So I started to search for tools and applications specifically in the context of learning and knowledge management and how they are adopting Gen AI in their service offering or product or even solutions and platforms. I found out a lot of companies. Some of them are really genuine. They are really defining real use cases. Other tools are just a copycat. They are just imitating others and duplicating what others are doing. So I filtered. So I found out around 170. I filtered out 70, and I remained with 100 solutions. They are offering authentic use cases and applications. Then, to dive a little bit into the study, I was also interested to categorize the knowledge management processes. So I wanted to create an evaluation grid, which tool is impacting which knowledge process and in which process or knowledge phase. Are we really at the learning phase? Are we developing knowledge, co-developing the way you describe it, then collective elaboration, when peer-to-peer, the many-to-many paradigm engage together in discussions. So are we in this phase, or are we in retaining and reusing our knowledge? I found out and I based my classification into 7 phases of the knowledge life cycle. And for every phase, I have defined the evaluation criteria. In other terms, the knowledge process itself. So for
Now,
example,
let me just
yes,
mention one thing where
yes.
this is where I thought the power of your study, and one thing too I want to mention is that you just openly shared this, I know, in a couple
Yeah.
of different LinkedIn posts. And so this information is out there for anybody who's interested. They can find it, or they can contact you in LinkedIn to get it. But this is a first glimpse as we look at the x-axis across the top in those 7 categories we're referring to, starting with social learning and personal capabilities. We're starting to see here fleshed out the use cases of how you can actually, it's kind of where the rubber hits the road and we can tangibly, concretely actually start to imagine how to do something. So I love personally how you plotted those against all the different potential tools and companies there. So back to you, Rachad.
Yep, exactly. And those use cases should be a continuous dialogue. And that was my intention. I made it public because even those 100 companies, imagine, believe it or not, some of them is fading out. As they are not here, I continuously update those 100 companies and some new entrants. We have always new players coming into the market. And this is where we can enrich this evaluation. And it meant to help practitioners and decision making if they are looking into a specific use case. For example, I know the learning and development team, they look into learning solutions that offers advanced multi-language learning. So on-the-fly translation, on-the-fly transcription, on-the-fly language detection or generation. So this use case, we offer it. It is we have identified some kind of solutions that offer specifically to that use case. What was also interested in this study to understand what are the services, or let's say the area of service that are most excelling and most investing in those tools. So in the next slide, I wanted to,
I just want to
yes,
mention, I just want to one thing that I just heard this morning.
yes,
I usually
yes.
wake up listening to financial news and a global show that I listen to. And this morning they were talking about a survey of CIOs, chief information officers in medium to large companies that was conducted, this survey. And 70% in 2024 of these CIOs anticipate spending more of their budget on AI related tools. And so do you want to do it blindly, or do you want to be able to understand, what are the potential use cases that are really meet your business priorities, and be able to take, select the tools and the companies that might be the best fit for you in order to be able to do that. So that's where some of the real relevance comes into play. I'll switch to the next slide for you.
Yeah, and back to your point, where we want to invest our budget and which area, and that specifically is a slide what answers. So it kind of distributing those investment and those interest in relative areas. And what I found out, 45 company out of 100 that are offering solutions are targeting customer support and customer service functions, because there's a real, let's say, pain and quick gain. We can quickly have return on investment when we deploy Gen AI tool. We can help improve our customer service indicators like retention or purchase or engagement, or problem resolution in terms of incidents management. Customer support and service is the leading area and the most propelling area. Other areas are lagging because, again, then the main point is to define the use cases, how we are going and augment our applications in that specific area. For example, content creation, content collaboration, and content platforms, cognitive service related to search, learning development. We are still trying to better understand how and where it can add value.
Yeah, and this is actually just really a foreshadowing of part two as we come to the end of part one here in terms of AI, generative AI, and KM, and that integration point. And the other thing that I mentioned in terms of the x-axis on in your Excel massive spreadsheet you built, showing the companies and how they have these services that might help these knowledge management processes that you identified across these 7 topics. What we're going to feature in our use case segment, which really gets us to, again, the meat of the conversation, those tangible items where you can start to imagine how to make this work and put it into play in your company or organization. These are the areas, the ones that you've highlighted here with the orange font are the areas that we're going to flesh out further and provide examples of how to put that into play in part 2 of our conversation.
Yep, exactly. So we are going to feature 7 use cases out of 35, and you can click on the link, you can see the full report and read in details every single use case.
Yeah, and that's going to be part 2. So that wraps up part 1. I want to thank you for your contributions and being a true expert in this area. And I'm sure that the audience has also appreciated your comments and your insights. So thank you very much, Rachad, for participating. I look forward to recording part 2.
Thank you, Dan. Me too. Let's jump into part 2.